Well, welcome. We're going to be talking about splitting stories today. I hope this sounds like looks like already it looks like a topic that people are have lots of questions about. Uh, Somebody asked if there's going to be a recording. This is being streamed through to YouTube, so it should be there as we upload it as we go. So hopefully it'll be there for you. Okay. Let's see. Just a few things. I'll give a few announcements here as we've got some more people joining. Um, Let me show you what I did exciting this week, just because I'm proud of it. This is my son and we did a live demo at DevOps Days and presented something on test-driven development. It was a lot of fun. It was also a very scary thing because you get that much in front of people and all kinds of things go wrong, but it actually worked pretty well. And it was very, very exciting. And it was a good opportunity for him to get some, if public speaking is scary, the only thing scarier is live coding in front of people. And so you put those things together and he's very well acclimated to public speaking now. So anyway, it was a lot of fun, and I got a lot of very interesting comments from it. Some of them we'll talk about today. One of the most interesting things was as we were writing code and we'd make a test pass, and then we'd come back and we'd rewrite that same line of code just to take the next step. And several people came up to me and mentioned that that is really hard for their team to do. And it has some bearing on what we're going to be talking about, splitting stories, because if you're not comfortable writing a story, getting something through, testing it, and then coming to the next story and then modifying it and evolving it to do something else, it's very hard to get your story size small because you'll want to do more and more things so you never have to come back to a line of code. We want to do the opposite. We want to be thinking of lines of code as something that we're going to get it working, and then we're going to change it, we're going to change it and change it again until we evolve into the system we're trying to design. Quick note, no session next week. My family and I are going to be on the road, and I thought I could fit something in, but I think we'll be cutting it too close with the plane if I try to do this. So no session next week, but I think we'll be picking up the week after that. Got a couple ideas of what's happening there, and I've got a few people said they'd be interested in talking on some things related to AI, Google's AI and Kubernetes and some things like that. So I'm looking forward to those coming up in the next few months. Also wanted to mention KCDC, if you're in the Kansas City area, June 26th, 27th, 28th, I'm going to be doing a workshop, behavior-driven development with robots. You may have seen, I did this as a demo, but we're actually going to give everybody robots and we're going to go through the process of behavior-driven development. This is a workshop I've done a lot for people, particularly when I'm going in and working with clients to try to get everyone on board of what we're trying to accomplish with behavior-driven development, because everybody can participate, even if you're not a developer. And so it's a really good way to kind of get everybody on board of here's what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm also doing a talk on Selenium patterns and anti-patterns. So that's, I think I'll be there the 26th and 27th. 28th, I may need to fly out, so I may not be around that day, but I'll be there for the 26th and 27th. Then one other thing, got this coming up. I haven't gotten it scheduled yet, but if you are interested, send me an email and I'll put you in the Ultra Early Bird list of, or send you a coupon code for the Ultra Early Bird when we do get scheduled. Improve your agile skills with 5 business books. We take 5 weeks, we go through and we take each week, we look at one of these business books, do a 30-minute summary of it, and then talk about how it applies to what we can learn about agility from these business books that aren't necessarily about agility.
If you do not know your attending number, press pound to continue.
Okay, let me mute this here for everybody just a second. Okay, anyway, it's a we've got some great feedback from people the last time we did it. It's a really good opportunity. I'm looking forward to doing it again just because I learned so much from just talking through what the principles look like in light of those business books. So that's coming up. If you're interested, interested in the Ultra Early Bird when we first launch it, send me an email. I'll make sure that you're on the list for that. Okay, so here's what we are going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about a banking application. So we're going to pretend that we're starting a bank customer web application. So where you go to do things like create your bank account, view your balances, bill payments, download tax forms, all that stuff that you do online with your bank. And what we're going to do is look at how would we actually start this as a way of trying to figure out how do we split things down to something really, really small. A bank account like this is going to be or a bank application like this will be something very, very big. But how do we start in a way that we're able to deliver pieces of things without being blocked where we can't deliver it until we deliver something really, really big? In lots of cases, tell me if this is has been your experience. But if you have an application like this, it's very hard to get started because everybody wants to, we end up making the stories bigger and bigger and bigger instead of smaller and smaller and smaller. So what we're going to look at today is how do we take the opposite approach? And so instead of being in a position where it's like, oh, we need to add this to it, we need to add this to it, we need to add this to it. What if we were to try to come up with a way that we're going to make it so small it seems stupid? And then if we find it's too small and not valuable, maybe we can make it bigger. But let's go the opposite extreme. Let's go to the extreme that's going to be very unnatural from the way that people are used to thinking of things. Because if we really push hard on that, there's some benefits we'll get from it. So with that in mind, here's our bank customer web application. Create bank accounts, view bank accounts, all the things you do at a bank. And so I have a question for you in Slido. What area would you want to work on first? So what area would you want to work on first? Would you want to work on, do you think you'd want to work on creating bank accounts for a new customer? Maybe the view, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer here. We'll talk through about what some of the trade-offs maybe that we're making in this. But when you look at this problem, how would you want to approach it? And like I said, there's not a right or wrong. I'm going to take it in one direction, but I think you could make a case for many of these. You could make a strong case for why you want to do it that particular way, and it probably work out just fine. There's lots of organizational things around this that might determine doing it one way or another. We have a few more minutes. I want to see where it looks like most of us are kind of in the creating bank accounts for a new customer, which I think is very legitimate. I could also see a way where we might want to say new accounts for existing customers. Maybe we want to have customers in already. There's some situations where that might make sense. Viewing balances and statements, which isn't the way I'm thinking about it, but I could see a way that you might want to do where that might make sense. In particular, if you were thinking in terms of trying to replace an existing system, that might be a very easy way to get started, is viewing existing balances and statements if it's just a matter of tying into the existing database instead of starting completely from scratch. So there's that, and the point here is that none of these are necessarily right or wrong. You just need to make sure you're intentional about how you choose them. Excuse me. Okay, so creating bank accounts. We're going to go with that one, that we're going to create the bank accounts for, and we'll do it with the idea for new users. So things that we might need to do that are, yes, that's a good point. Viewing balances could be a great test for test driving the rest. And we're going to talk about that because some of what may drive what we do is thinking about how do I actually show people that this did what I said it would do. So creating bank accounts, things we might want to be thinking about is creating the user accounts, implementing the user login, implementing the admin login. We could create a database. I mean, there's all types of things we could do under the idea of creating a bank account, of breaking it down into something smaller. So within what we've talked about, what do you think? And let's assume that this is completely greenfield. We have nothing built already. This is a brand new bank no one's seen before. So what do you see as being the absolute simplest first story to start with? What's the absolute simplest thing we could do to get started? And I see in the chat there's some great ideas, and just because I'm headed in one direction, I'm not trying to say that those other directions aren't good. Those could be great ways to do it depending on your circumstances. I just needed to pick one, and this is the one I happen to pick. So don't make this, I don't want this to sound like this is the correct place to start. What I want to show you is how we take where we started and break it down into things that are small enough that we can deliver rapidly, very small things. Okay, so somebody says a login page for users, and that could be a very legitimate place to start. Set up a static site, also very legitimate. A login page. View bank account details, so a page showing the account details for something, and maybe we just put it into the database just so we can show it's there. Static site with build pipeline. A login. Connections to a DB. A login page. A deploy pipeline, login page, login. A lot of people are interested in the login. Somebody put in the chat, creating an account. So these are all different things that we can do. And it looks like a lot of us are looking at the idea of a login, which makes perfect sense. One thing I do want to point out is most of these things that people are putting on here have to do with things that the user can actually experience. And I think that's very important. Like I saw one having to do with the database. And while we will get to a point that we will need a database, I want to encourage you to think of your user stories as things that are done from the user's perspective. Because if we start getting into the technical details of things in order to split stuff up, it's very easy for our scope to grow and grow because we're not driven by what's the smallest thing that I can do to get to that next step for someone. So I would encourage you that if you're starting to think of things in terms of words that developers understand, but the user can't experience, you may want to try to find ways to reword that so you're not focused on the technical aspect of it and you're more focused on here's how the user is going to experience this. Now, user experiencing it, there can be kind of a wide range of ways to experience, particularly when you're first starting off. Like, for example, if we have something that creates an account and then we have to show them that it's in the database because we don't have a page to show it to them on yet, that might be a way to kind of bootstrap ourselves. It's not how we want to necessarily work all the time, but that might make sense to say, we're going to show you that we can create a form, get into something. So what we're going to look at here, though, so those are all answers that I think there's lots of very valid reasons why you might want to do those answers. But I'm going to start with something. The most dead simple thing I can think of is to have the application name. As a visitor to the application, I want to see the application name so I know I'm at the right place. Now, this sounds almost stupid level. Like if you tell the developers this is what you want them to do, you will probably get some crazy looks. And they'll say, we can do that in 5 minutes. Why would we even bother with something as simple as just showing the application name? And this is where I think a lot of teams go wrong when they're trying to think of splitting user stories, because instead of doing something that's so simple, there's a resistance to doing something that simple. But the reality is, if we actually want to deliver something all the way through, that really simple thing of being able to get the name and then get it deployed where the user can experience, whether it's production or production-like environment, maybe a production environment that's locked down just for the people who are the business people that are testing it. There are going to be a lot of steps to make that happen. So what we're looking at right here is having, we'll go and draw a page. So just to make sure everybody's clear on how stupidly simple this is, and this is going to be Bank X. Okay, so there's that's all we're talking. There's nothing on the page except for the name of the application. Yes, Jay, that is a very good point. It's about the definition of done, not just coding. And if we start with something that is so simple, we think we can take it all the way through, we will be establishing the habits we need of delivering things all the way through without kind of cheating with stuff. Bank must be owned by Elon Musk. Yes, Elon Musk this must be his bank. I'm sure he would love to have bankx.com as a URL. Of course, I guess he could just do bank.x.com if he wanted. Anyway, so this is very, very, very simple, but the goal here is to actually deliver something. And this is probably the simplest thing we can deliver that will show the users we have taken a step toward delivering what you've asked for. You can see the name of the application. I can't think of anything we could strip out of this that would actually be seen as progress taken a step forward. So if you present a story like this, though, you are probably going to get pushback from developers saying that that's too simple. And sometimes what I found is you have to just ask for them to humor you and say, please, let's go ahead and do this. If you think this is really fast and we get it done really, really quick, look how good our metrics will look, right? We'll get things through, which I'm not. Okay, maybe don't say that because that kind of sets the wrong expectations. But the point is, we want to work on our ability to deliver things, get them all the way through the system. That's what we want to be focused on, not how much stuff can we push through the system at a time, because then we start growing our scope. So this is probably about the simplest story I think that you can come up with. Now, that doesn't mean that any, oh, I'd like this. I just saw the thing Taylor wrote that one of their teams did this. They demoed it, and the stakeholders were super impressed when they saw results in 2 weeks. And I think that's really key, because what we're wanting, one piece of what we're wanting to do here is we're wanting to establish trust with the stakeholders. And the thing that will establish trust with the stakeholders is frequently demonstrating that we've made progress. And that is way more important than demonstrating massive amounts of progress at random time intervals. If you want the stakeholders to trust you, showing that, hey, it's been a short period of time and we've done something. It's been a short period of time and we've done something else. That establishes way more trust than trying to say, oh, it was a long period of time, and look, we gave you all these things. Because from the stakeholder standpoint, they may not have a really good idea of how long different things take. But if you can show them the frequency that you're delivering things, that helps give them an idea of how you're moving forward. Yes, Lynn says the smallest amount of code that delivers value. But and I'm just curious into chat, if you ask your team to deliver something like this, do you think they're going to be on board with it? Do you think that's going to be an easy sell to say, we're going to just have this simple thing that says, as a user, I can visit the site and see the name of the application? Is that a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Is that an easy thing? What do you think? Okay, some people are yes, some people are no. And what I want to, if you are trying to do this, you are going to have to sell this to your team. Business analysts would say the client wouldn't be satisfied. So that's where you have to really sell it, is explain to the business analyst, this is not our goal to satisfy the customer with everything. What we're wanting to do is show them that we've worked on something and we've made a step forward in it. Now, if you can do this and then the next story as well, all the better. And one interesting thing I found with this is when I've helped teams do this, it's amazing how often we discover we don't know what the name of the application is supposed to be. You'd think that would be a simple thing, but a lot of times that's not, there's a lot of angst that goes into trying to figure out the application name. And one thing I want to point out is if we start with this, we hit this and start having discussions with it right away, right? We start hitting the discussion of what are we going to call this, hopefully within the first 15 minutes of we're going to work on this story. So let's say we get that done and we get delivered. It goes all the way through to production, and now they can see production or a production-like environment. Now we can demonstrate that they're able to see this application. Now we shouldn't be waiting until 2 weeks to actually show people that we made progress on it. If that's great to do it at a demo, but this should be something we're showing people. I mean, if we get this deployed and then we find out that that's not the name of the bank, it would be good to get that fixed before we end up with the demo. So this is something we should be working with the business to demonstrate that it's working. Or we may find that no one on the business side of things actually has access to this server. So there's all these things that have to happen as part of being able to say that this is complete. So what's the next story might be something like this. Now, once again, this probably seems stupidly simple, like application logo. We're just going to put, but in a lot of cases, actually getting an image deployed now that we've deployed a text file, sometimes there's some barriers to that. I've seen this actually take people a lot longer than you would think it would, because you're setting up the server to now handle image files, which is very, very important, but may not be just there out of the box. Or if it is really easy, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we're able to add the logo to this really, really quickly, then that's great. And let's move on to the next thing. So let's see, what do we want our logo to be for the bank? I got here, we'll do it. It will be, I want to do Scrooge McDuck, but I'm not good at drawing him. So it'll just be that, there's our logo. So now we've got this thing delivered. Now I want to point out a couple things here. Notice that the stories didn't specify the name or the logo. So did you see that? We didn't say what the name was. We didn't say what the logo was. Because our stories here are placeholders for the conversations we need to have as part of delivering this. Now, if somebody went in and like, oh, I found the logo, I'm going to add it to the application, add it to our ticket just so we've got it and everybody can find it. I'm not saying there's no way that could happen, but the point is we don't need to have all these things worked out. Part of the work of this story is making sure we agree on the name of the application, making sure we agree on the logo that's going to be there, or possibly discovering that we don't agree, or we don't know the name of the application, or we don't know what the logo is supposed to look like. Okay, so now here's an interesting question. Oh, did I ask why did we do this? Okay. It's interesting. I don't remember what I was thinking with this. Okay, let's skip this one because I think I kind of talked about that. We left it out because we want to have the conversation around it. So, what if the business doesn't have a logo to use? Okay, so imagine we've got this story, we want to add the logo to it, but then we talk to the business and find out the business really doesn't know what logo they need, or it hasn't been developed yet. It's a new application. So, what would be a sane response to them not having the logo that we need? What do you think you would do here? So, choose from a couple options here what you think. So you can put that story on the backlog and work on something else. Lorem ipsum, yes, that would work. Use a photo of someone in the business as a temporary logo, or block the story and work on training until they get the logo. So the answer here that I like the best, and some of this may have to do with come up with a name the world that would never ship, right? It it sounds maybe funny and unintuitive, and it depends on the culture of your particular organization. But oftentimes, putting something up that people don't want is the best way to get what you actually want. I used to work for a large church up in Michigan. So there's like 200 people on staff. So a very, very large church. And I was running the IT department, and we were redoing the website, and we needed to get pictures of everybody, all the leadership to put on the website. So it was a large number of people. And we had a studio set up, take pictures of them and things. And some people just weren't showing up. So I was at a leadership meeting one week, and I said, okay, we need you guys to come down. If you don't, I would love to be the artist and draw pictures. I would be happy to draw pictures of you, and we can use those. So I showed them. I was like, here is some of my great artwork. And if you would like me to use this instead of coming down and getting your photo taken, I would be happy to use this artwork in place of it. Everyone came down that day that hadn't come and got their picture taken because no one wanted to have the placeholder artwork that I was so willingly to donate my artistic talents to. But yes, if sometimes the best thing we can do is put something temporarily in place. Now, the beauty of this is that if we're able to deploy and quickly get something all the way through, if we're able to deploy this and get it all the way through, and then they come back and say we want to change the logo, that is not a big step. That can just probably even just be done as part of the next story we deploy. Hey, they don't like the dollar signs. They're going to replace it with, well, maybe they replace it with Scrooge McDuck or something like that. Or it needs to, for some reason, it's got wings on it. I don't know, to show your money flying away. Oh, something like that. Okay, so now we got our logo. But the thing I want to point out here is we're doing things that allow us to move forward, right? And show that we are capable of delivering. In a lot of cases, if we put a logo that they don't want and they say, oh, here's the real logo, and within 3 hours we show that we've changed it and deployed it, that is not an experience that many people have actually. That experience of saying, hey, we need something different, and it gets changed, within a few hours, builds a huge amount of trust. We want to make our process so it can actually do that type of thing, but then we want to actually demonstrate it so people get used to that type of trust. Because if your stakeholders are seeing that you're able to change things quickly, one thing that it does is it often makes them easier to interact with because they're not so worried about saying the wrong thing. They're more likely to give you feedback. Oh, here's what I think we're supposed to do, because they know if I do get it wrong or discover something later on, this team is capable of changing it very rapidly. And we're not approaching the system from the idea of it being carved in stone. We expect to deploy stuff and change it and evolve as we go. If they don't have that experience with your team, they're more likely to get frozen and so worried about not making the wrong answer that even the things that they do know will take a very long time to try to drag out of them. So that's one of the reasons that even though this might seem, oh, look, we wasted time because we delivered it with one thing and then went back and delivered with something else, that's actually a good thing if you're delivering it rapidly, and can build a huge amount of trust with your stakeholders. Okay, so let's look at this a little more. So what do we need to create a bank account here? So here are just some things we're thinking about. So a logged in user, user account, account number, account type, account owner name, address of owner, balance. These are all good things, right? These are all things that we do need to have as part of our application at some point. But what we don't want to do is be blocked on the ones that we'd be fine with delivering later, and that come at the expense of actually delivering the next incremental step for the customer. So we need to somehow strip this down to the very bare minimum things that we need to create an account. And so that might look something like this. What data represents the simplest concept of an account? It might be the account number, the account owner name, and maybe the balance. Now, we might be able to say that really the account owner name we don't need at this point. We just need an account number and a balance. Or we could even go even simpler and say it's just the account number. There's not a right or wrong answer as far as what we put in here, but the point is we want it to be very small. So maybe we end up doing something like this. Maybe we do, and we say, okay, to have an account, let's assume that we decide we need the account owner's name and we need an account number. So we could create a story for that basically says something along the lines of, as a user visiting the site, I can create an account, or let me do it in Gherkin format. Given I'm on the account creation page, when I enter my account details, then an account is created. Okay, so Maverick, let me write that down just so in Gherkin. I'll get rid of my beautiful artwork here because it's going to get in the way. So this is the account creation page. So I'm on the account when I'm just going to say enter my info. Time for a new one of these. Then the account is created. Okay, that show up. Okay, so very simple, very generic, right? This is a very generic way of describing what we're wanting to do here. Now, behind the scenes, this is going to evolve a lot, right? So I create a page. Let's go ahead. So we've got our front page here, and we're going to create an account page, account creation page, and let's say that page looks something like this. So we've got our page. I'm going to I'll call it the account ID. And we've got that here. And owner name. Okay, so there's our page right there. And we can submit it. Okay, so I go to this, and maybe my very first thing I do is when you create this over here, I go to the account creation page, I enter my info, so I just give an account ID and an owner name. The account is created. Maybe even what this checks is it just goes to the database and makes sure that the fields I typed in here are in the database. Now, this is very silly, like stupid simple, right? The next story that I could do, I keep leaving letters out. Okay. The next story I could do might be something along saying that when I go to the list of accounts, I go to the list of accounts, then there's a list of all the accounts that have been created. Maybe it's kind of an admin backend page. Now, a couple things I want to point out, and then I could go and just check. Whoops, that was a mistake. Hang on, let me that so I don't. Maybe that's where I go to for this. Now, notice what has been left out here. I don't have any login controls over this. I don't even have the different concept between. I don't even have the concept of the difference between this being a user typing this and an admin doing something else. Matter of fact, let me go and represent that page. So maybe we decide we're making good progress, and we create this other page that is just going to be ID, name, and then it will just list these things out. Doesn't do anything. It's just a way of listing out all the accounts in the system. And I'm going to say then the account is created. So we could break that out separate from this. Let's just assume that it was simple enough we added to it. So this still seems, we've got, this story actually generated 2 pages. We could probably get by with just one, but just for illustration, so we're thinking of it this way. I could, okay, so notice we don't have a login. This would probably be an admin page. This would be something that a user would do. But we've made progress in delivering something, but we know we're going to change it, right? This is eventually going to have some type of authentication to figure out what the user is to see if they can create an account or see if they can create a bank account. This here is probably only going to be available to the backend admin user and may even go away entirely at some point. But even if it does go away entirely at some point and is replaced by other things, this is not a bad first step to have in order to demonstrate this. Because what we've done is we've created something that we can give to our users and we can say, go in and create some accounts. And once they start coming in here and creating accounts, they're going to have lots of other ideas of what they want to see next. And one of the part of the beauty of taking really small things and delivering them rapidly by doing really, really small stories like this is once they start using this, the business is going to start having conversations about what they want to see next. They may say, you know, we really need to be able to do some stuff with the balance, so let's build that next. Or they may say something along the lines of, what about the account type? So I'm going to assume in this particular case that what's likely to happen is they're going to say something along the lines of, you know, this is great, we can create an account, but we've got different types of accounts. We've got checking accounts and we've got savings accounts, and some of the information we need for those is very, very different. So we may then need to grow this to handle that. So let's kind of talk through what that would look like. So I've still got this story for creating an account here, but what the next step we want to take, though, is trying to find a very, very small story that starts taking into account these other things in the way we create accounts. So so a diagram might look something like this. So I may have something right here for creating an account. And if it's a checking account, it goes up here and does this thing. So we'll call this checking. So that's checking. And then maybe down here is what it does for savings. And let's assume that at this bank, savings account can be held by international entities, but checking accounts can't. So for some reason in the savings account, we then need to have to go down here if it's international. And there's a process for that. If it's not, it goes over here and goes to this, which is domestic. And maybe there's a few stages here for tax stuff. Maybe this is international tax, things that you don't need for the others. And then this eventually comes up here to something that's common to both of them. And then maybe eventually we've got this place that all of them end up. So something like this here. So the checking is really simple. And I'm just making stuff up. If you're in banking and you say the checking is actually more complicated. So anyway, this is what the business is saying they need to do. So like, okay, now we need to create different accounts types. So this is what they're saying. Well, we probably do not want to start. What we don't want to do is say, okay, yes, we'll do all of this, right? We'd want to start with the very simplest thing we possibly can. So we'd probably want to take this and break it down just to be the checking all the way through. And I'll make this the end right here. That's the end process. So we'll probably want to take a sliver that goes through like this. And there's lots of things that can happen along this. So let's actually, instead of end, I'm going to make this the confirmation page, right? So that's the confirmation page for both of them. Well, the very first thing for checking might be a matter of just acquiring all the other information we need for checking. And maybe we even make it, like I've seen teams, what they did is these usually would go through a confirm page and then go to, once you said it was good, you click the button and it would submit it. And what some teams did is said, yes, we do want that. But our first story is just going to be when you submit it, it sticks it directly in the database and then we show the pages there. The reason they did that is because they wanted to show incremental progress and split the story out, and then later they added that other confirmation page into the center of it when it was the most important thing for the user. But if you're delivering this and you get this through, like, let's say we let me break this up. I'm using confirm, and I want to call that something else. Let's call this actually, we'll call this end. Let's say there's a confirm right here. If we skip that confirm the first time we go through this, and they do the checking, and then it just shows the, here's what you did, instead of them having to confirm their information, we now put the business owners in the position where they can decide, is the next most important thing to do to build this confirmation, or is the next most important thing to start building on the savings side of things? But that's only going to happen if we're actually delivering small things rapidly through. Because if we're delivering things and every few days they're starting to see progress, it's very easy for them they're in the mindset and they're going to be able to say what they want to see next. If we disappear for 2, 3, 4 weeks, something like that, before they get to see anything else, they're going to be asking for much larger chunks. So it's kind of this, we can end up in a virtuous cycle to where the smallness that we're doing things and delivering it all the way through helps the business ask for more small things, or we can be in a cycle where the size and how long it's taking for us to deliver things is actually encouraging the business to give us larger chunks altogether. But the way that we get there is by starting with these dead simple stories that sound so simple, like they'll only take 15 minutes, and because it's always going to take longer than we expect. But we only get there by starting with the dead simple stories and then growing and then continuing to build on top of those. The bigger we start with, the harder it is to actually get to the point that the harder it is for the business to ask for smaller things. We have to really try hard to push toward that really small end of things. Let me take a look at the chat. Okay, Astrid points out that there are people that need to be limited on their what if questions in the early stages of development. They're urgently need. Okay, so that's a good point. So what will happen, and you probably experienced this, is you get into these and you try to do this, and you got that one person that's trying to add value by asking all the questions and saying, oh, but what if it's the checking account? What if it's a savings account? What if it's international? And what I found is the smaller this is, the easier it is to defer those questions. Because if I add, in here I've got 2 fields, if I've got 10 fields, and you've got the person asking the question saying, we need to add 1 more, that's a lot easier for them to push for 1 more when you've got 10 fields and are trying to add, and they think there's 11th one that's really important for some reason. But if I've only got 2 fields, and we explain that the reason that we're using these is these are the bare minimum we need to create an account and demonstrate that it's in the database, that's a lot easier conversation to have. But once again, is that thing of these really, really small stories push toward having better interactions, and the larger we make them, the worse the interactions are going to be. Now, in a lot of cases, so let's go back to this, another way to split it. So we talked about splitting things of taking the easiest path through. We talked about even kind of reworking some of our ideas about what confirmation is going to look like. My spelling is just awful today. Reworking what some of the what the flow is going to look like, leaving out some of the steps for. We've taken a path that's the simplest, and then within that path, that workflow, we left out the confirmation at first because we knew we could demonstrate that it works without it, and then we add that back in when the customer wants it. The other thing that we can do is we can take a slice all the way through as well, which is kind of what we were doing here. We can say, okay, for the checking account, we're going to only take these 2 fields and walk it through. Maybe we do want to walk it through the confirmation in the end, and because that's what's important to the customer. But instead of having 10 fields there, we're going to do the first 2, get it working all the way through, make sure the customer says, oh, yes, we like this flow, but now we need these other fields added. And then we come back in the next story, we add the 8, 10, whatever fields need to be part of this. So as far as ways of splitting stuff up, let's go through the different ways that we split things so far. So we took our account ID here, or we started out by just the simplest thing we could possibly think of. Simplest thing of just the name and then just the logo to make sure we're able to deliver something. Then we took the smallest number of fields that we needed to represent something in the database and created the simplest page we can just to get that in the database and then show that it's there. And then we started thinking about this workflow. And we've got this fairly complicated workflow of everything that needs to happen. But we decided we were going to start with the easiest path. Whatever path through the workflow is the easiest, which in our example here was checking. Then we looked at how we could split that down even further. And one of the ways we could do it is by leaving out some of the steps, leaving out maybe the confirmation. So this first page does a bunch of stuff and maybe there's no logic and just puts it in the database, which is kind of what we ended up with here already, I guess. But then we also looked at a slicing through this way to where we say, okay, we're going to take and we're going to go through the steps of the workflow. We're going to just use as few fields as we need to that will let us get through the end. And so maybe it simplifies that as well, but we split it through that way. So those are several ways we can split stories that hopefully will have application to what you're seeing as well. Just from this one application, we've only got checking and savings accounts lined out here so far. Let me see here. Okay, so I want to pause there and just see if anyone has any questions about this, or if like how does this feel like it applies to what you're doing? Does it seem applicable?
Mark, can I ask something real quick?
Absolutely.
Just because I think it might help some folks on the call, could you like talk for a second about like how small is too small? Because you keep emphasizing small, and I'm wondering whether that's being interpreted possibly as okay, like I can do this task and that's fine. That is, and also as a related to that, when you earlier alluded to show progress, can you be more specific about what that actually means objectively? Yeah.
So excellent questions. In terms of showing progress, what we want to do is we want the people who use the system, which probably will be the business at first, but we want them to see what has changed in this deployment and say, yes, I see how this is, from my way of interacting with the system, I see how we've taken a step toward what I want to deploy for the end users. And that's progress, because that's progress from their standpoint. Now, if I just say we built a database, that's not going to show up as progress for them. So I want to do my stories in a way that might require a database, right? This would require a database to get from this to this. But that's not what we're delivering as a database. We're delivering this capability of you can create an account and then see that it's there. So the smallest thing that actually shows, very, very good point. Not a task, right? This is something that is usability. It's functionality in the system, even if it, and this may not seem like functionality, but being able to go to an application and say, yes, I'm at the right place is functionality in the system, right? It's doing something, no matter how small it is. I can look and see the logos there, and I know I have confidence that, yes, I'm at the right bank because I saw that. That's the user interacting with your system in a way that does something for them. So that's the side of what it means to actually take a step forward. Now, as far as how small to make it, I think a lot of people are worried that, hey, if we have something that just takes 30 minutes or 2 hours, we couldn't possibly make that into its own story. If you hear that, you need to ask why not, right? Why couldn't we just do a story that takes 2 hours? And often the reason that people aren't willing to do that is because the deployment takes 10 hours. And so they're not willing to go through the deployment process for something that they only spent 2 hours on. The problem there is not the size of the story. What's happening is the small story is pushing you to see that your deployment process is inefficient and costs too much. Because if your deployment cost, and I mean 10 hours for a lot of people would be great, but let's say your deployment process takes an entire week of heads down everybody working on doing this. Well, that is going to limit how small you're going to be willing to make your stories, because no one wants to spend a week's worth of work to deploy a logo or just the name of something. No one would want to do that because the overhead of delivering the story is so high, it prevents you from doing the small story. So usually what I find with most teams is if we try to aim for stories that we think we can probably finish in less than 2 days. That tends to be a pretty good balance of things, with some that they can finish maybe even in an hour or something like that. They get into it and talk through with the business on things. But if we're working on stuff that we're planning on taking more than 2 days, it's probably going to take a week or longer. When our company's doing something, we usually are shooting for things that we can turn around in one day, like start on them in the beginning of the day, and then have them delivered and ready for people to use at the end of the day. Some places are even shorter than that. But if you're looking at more things that take more than 2 days, you probably need to really look at why. Is it because it's so big, or is it because the deployment process is so big that it's forcing you to? If most of the story is the process of deploying it, that's an area that needs to be automated. Is that, Tizzy, did that answer what you were asking?
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for asking. That was a great question. Less than a few hours worth a day. Some say less than one day. Okay. 1 to 5 days. The reason I don't like 5 days, the reason I'm more on the 2 days or less, and if you can finish multiple stories in a day, that is awesome. But if you're dealing with something that's 5 days, and let's say it takes 3 times as long, well, now you're dealing with something that's taken you 3 weeks, and so you're not getting that rapid feedback. If you're dealing with something that's 1 or 2 days, and it takes 3 times as long, now you're looking at either 3 days or maybe 6 days, and you probably have a lot better idea of. You're going to get feedback a lot sooner when something is needs to get attention and saying, hey, maybe this is more complicated than we thought, or maybe we're headed in the wrong direction and all. So that's why I push toward the much smaller. But also, when I say the thing with 1 to 5 days, if I shoot for 2 days, we're going to have some things that take 5 days, and that's okay. That's going to happen sometimes. But if I shoot for 5 days, I'm going to have some things that take 3 weeks, and that's what I want to try to avoid. So with Anthony's thing, I think 1 to 5 days is very good. If you're delivering everything between 1 to 5 days, that's great. But I can guarantee you, if you shoot for 5 days, some of those times are going to take a lot longer than 5 days. Okay, where are we at? Okay, well, I'm going to do this. Hang on, let me see. I had a couple things I wanted to ask here. Make sure I covered everything, and then okay, I think we're ready. Let me cut over to this. So let's do let me show you. So here is our wonderful shirts, right? We just got some of these printed. I think Tizzy is the first person to receive one. So I congratulate. Oh, did it come? Did you get yours, Tizzy? All right, okay. So we're going to give away one of these shirts. I think I've got mediums and large, and the extra large I'm getting ready to print. So let's do that. Whoops. Need to get here, I think. This is how I do it. There we go. Okay, so everybody join the quiz, and your chance to win a shirt. So have people are joining. Let me see what this is. What if you don't know how long a story will take? Is there another way to size or scope the story? So if you don't know how long it will take, then it probably can be done smaller, right? And which doesn't mean you have to know exactly how long it will take. But if you're not sure if something's going to take 2 days or 2 months, make it smaller, right? Make it small enough that the developers say, hey, I think we can finish this story in 2 to 4 hours, and then I think we can deploy it in another 4 to 5 hours, and so that's about how long we think it'll take. And then if you run into something, it turns out it takes an extra day, you're still dealing with things that are small enough that you're going to be getting rapid feedback on them. But yes, if you don't know how long something will take, if you can't kind of guess at an upper limit of how long something should take you, it's probably too big. What if we can't deploy something? They're legal, know your customer requirements for a bank account. So I'm talking about here something that is completely from scratch. You're not going to be able to deploy this until you get to enough of it being done. But live and as a banking application. However, you can get it into an environment where the business can start using it and making sure, like, yes, this flow works, and yes, this makes sense from the standpoint of the user. So it may not end up going to production, but you can get it out where people can experience it. Okay, let's give 2 more seconds for joining the quiz. Okay, we've only got 60 people joined. There's 142 people on the call. Your chances are pretty good of getting a shirt. Only 1 out of 61. 161st, is that how you say it? Anyway, okay, I'll give it 5 more seconds for people to join. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's get started. What is the most important reason for starting with a story for displaying the application name? Is it because it's impossible to change the name, so we don't forget what we are doing in order to prioritize the delivery of something all the way through the process, or to make sure none of the devs are on the wrong team? You have 5 seconds remaining. Lock in your answer. 2, 1, and time is up. And yes, in order to prioritize the deliver of something all the way through the process. While it probably is good to make sure that none of the devs are on the wrong team, the big thing we're focusing on is we want to start getting things all the way through the process to make sure we can actually deliver. And so we start thinking in terms of, we want to start thinking in terms of how do we optimize our delivery process and make that efficient. It doesn't matter if we're really, really efficient at delivering code, but our delivery process is really inefficient, it's going to push really bad behaviors of having bigger and bigger things. And the bigger we make our stories, the longer it takes for us to get feedback. And the longer it takes for us to get feedback, the more we can work on something only to discover it's not really what the customer wanted. And it may be exactly what they asked for, but it may not be exactly what they want. So the smaller those things are, the faster we get the feedback. Okay, leaderboard. Jim's in top spot, followed by Huso, Dylan, Seda, and Anjali, I think is how you pronounce it. Hopefully I didn't butcher those too bad. What should we do with the logo story if the business doesn't have the logo ready? Should we block the story, move the story to the backlog, complain that the business is not taking things seriously enough, or deliver the story with a silly placeholder? According to this talk, what we said is we should deliver the story with a silly placeholder. And the reason we don't want to block the story is because, let's see, what were the other answers? Move the story to the backlog. Okay, so if we were to move the story to the backlog, we now have to start other work. So if that happens, we now have work that is in progress that we're not going to be able to show the value of because it's back in the backlog. So we want to, if at all possible, get that through and show the value of it. If we move to backlog or just block it, blocking it might be, in a lot of organizations, that's the way to kind of raise the flag and say, hey, these other teams aren't delivering what they want, or what we need to move forward. But if we show that we can, if the idea of the story was to put the correct logo in place, what we've kind of done is split that out and said, we're going to start off by putting a logo in place and showing that we can do a logo, and it will be easy to change if we want to. The confidence that comes from the team seeing that from the stakeholders seeing that we delivered something and then we were able to change it when they wanted something different is very crucial in teams performing effectively. Because if when they start seeing that, you'll start getting faster feedback. If they don't see that, they're going to be a lot more hesitant to give you answers because they're going to be worried that if they get it wrong, it can't be changed. Okay, and our leaderboard here, Jim's still in top spot, followed by Dylan, I think, Kindle, JCB, and Dennis. Next question. What is the name of the upcoming course Mark mentioned? Is it Improve Your Agile Skills with 5 Business Books? Is it 5 Agile Principles for Writing Business Books? Improve Your Business Skills with 5 Agile Principles? Or, misspelled, Magnets? How do they work? I gave a lot more time on this one where I read it a lot faster. And yes, we've got Improve Your Agile Skills with 5 Business Books. I threw some tricky ones in there for you to mix things up. So let's see. We've got JCB pulls into the top spot. Next question. What is the next week's Agile Lunch and Learn session about? No session, user stories, artificial intelligence, Agile principles in the Epic of Gilgamesh, or Kubernetes demonstration? Thank you, Alf. Should have started the quiz sooner. And Matt, I'm looking at your question here. I'll look at it in just a minute. Okay, Lynn moves in the top spot, followed by JCB, Pushpa, Anu, and David S. I think we've got 2 more questions. If you have a story that needs logic for 2 paths, what is a reasonable approach? Make sure the story includes all paths. Split the story and do the simplest path first. Create separate stories for the database and the UI, or create separate teams for each path. What is a reasonable approach when you have a story that needs logic for 2 paths? Yes, splitting the story and doing the simplest path first. The problem with making sure the story includes all the paths is you're likely that's headed in a direction that will continue to grow in scope, and we're trying to have smaller scope delivered more often. Creating separate stories for the database and the UI probably is not what we want to do, because then we're not being driven by how the user experiences it. And in my experience, when you start building things like that, you lose the guide rails that keep you focused on just the next bit of functionality, and you can end up with a lot of stuff in the database or a lot of stuff in the UI that's not driven by just taking that next incremental step of what the user can do with the software. JCB is back in the top space, followed by Lynn, Pushpa, Anu, and Astrid. According to this talk, what do many teams avoid that they should embrace? Pilates, large stories, English grammar, writing code in one story only to change it in the next, or assembly language? I think is this last question, last or second to last question. What do many teams avoid that they should embrace? And yes, writing code in one story only to change it in the next. A lot of times teams are very concerned. It's very hard for teams to get into the habit of evolving code. When teams do get in that habit, it can be very, very powerful, but sometimes it takes a while to get used to that. And okay, last question. Oh, there we go. Okay, Lynn F., you took the top spot. Very good. Send me an email. You can take a screenshot of it, or I'll probably be able to figure out you either way. Let me know where you want it sent and your t-shirt size. I think I've got medium, large, and I've got extra large coming. I may have one small left. I can't remember. Let me know your size and we'll get you something close as we've got to it. So thank you everybody for coming, and I will stick around a little bit because I see there's some questions that people had. Matt was asking, actually, let me stop the streaming here and we'll chat. If you need to go, thank you so much for coming. Remember, no session next week.